I'm Renee Evans, and this is A Life You Love. I'm hosting some special guests as we talk about the things that impact our lives as women, from motherhood to healthy boundaries, to stepping into leadership and building community. Join me in creating a life you love. Hi, welcome to A Life You Love. I'm your host, Renee Evans, and I am here with our guest, Havilah Cunnington. I am so excited, not just because Havilah is a good friend of mine and we've done a lot of life together, but I love the way that she does life and the intentionality in which she does ministry and motherhood. And I want to dive into that a little bit on this episode. We're going to talk about the juggle of motherhood and ministry. How do we chase our dreams? How do we live the call that is on our life, that God has put on our lives? And how do we do all of that in the midst of relationship? Because it takes intentionality. And I think a lot of times as women, we talk about balance. And I just don't know if balance exists. I think it's an unrealistic expectation that we put on ourselves sometimes. And so I want to talk about that, and it's my hope that we can just have this conversation and that it would relieve some pressure and it would relieve some just expectations that maybe you've placed on yourself. And I want to just dive into that conversation. What does that look like for you, Havilah? Tell us a little bit about your life, because it's kind of wild and crazy.
It is a little wild. Yeah. And you know, I'm a wife and a mom.
Yeah.
I have 4 sons. We had 4 boys in 5 years. It was wild. And when our littlest was 3 months old, God had us move, and I started working and leading an organization. So I had 4 boys, 5 and under, and I started working. And it was wild. Like, it was not perfect by any means, but we started to run that organization and eventually started our ministry called Truth to Table. And I still travel a couple times a month and bring our kids with us at certain times. So learning to juggle has been, I think, a process.
Yeah.
I think it's been, I want to say it's fluid. I think it has to be breathable, because one size doesn't fit all. And also what worked for you last year or even last month may not work for you this month, and may not actually be, your future.
Yeah.
So you really have to start to figure that out.
Yeah. I know that there's a lot of moms, and I have conversations with moms all the time. And it's like, how do I do this? Like, how do I either feel like I'm being a good mom or I'm being great at my job, but I don't know how to do both really well. Like, can you just tell us a little bit about how you're intentional with whatever is in front of you?
Well, I think you probably relate to this, Renee. When I was a young single woman, I did not understand mom guilt. I didn't understand any of that. And then when I got married and had my first baby, there was this thing called mom guilt that no one had told me about.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was even real. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I was doing a bad job. And it was just, no one said it to me. Nobody told me I needed to do a specific thing. It was just this guilt that I was holding this little life in my hands, and I was messing up. And it started realizing that mom guilt was something I had to actually go and renew my mind and steward that part, because the more that I listened to that mom guilt, the smaller my world got. And I remember feeling, like I was miserable at work and I was miserable at home, because I felt like I couldn't do it all. I couldn't go to work and be fully invested, because I was a mom and I had babies at home, and I was thinking about who's going to make dinner and who's going to put them to bed, and does everybody have clean underwear? And then I would go home and I'd be thinking, all these adults are waiting for me to get these things done, and it's not fair for me to hold them up. So I really went through it, and finally I remember the Holy Spirit speaking to me and saying, Havilah, you're going to have peace everywhere, and you're going to have to make a choice to have peace. Yeah. And so I remember thinking, if I'm on the road, I'm going to have peace. If I'm at home, I'm going to have peace, not because of circumstances, but because I've chosen to let peace be the ruler in my life. So I'm not saying it always is there. It's not perfect by any means, but learning to do that. I did not know how to do what I'm doing, and nobody does, you know? So I always say, stop expecting yourself to be an expert in a season you've never been in before.
Yeah, and it's so, I think with social media, even these days, it's so deceiving to think that people have it all together, right? Because it is that highlight reel of someone's life, and I'm like, I have 3 kids. Like my youngest is 3 at the moment and my oldest is 7, and we pastor a church and we're just busy, you know, busy and full busy and great busy, but like, let's not pretend that it's not stressful. Let's not pretend that we drop balls when we're trying to do this whole juggle, right? Because I mean, we do.
We do.
And I forgot to take my kids to school one day this week. Like, for no reason, I just forgot to take my kids to school. So you're welcome. I hope that makes you feel better. But sometimes we drop the ball, and it's like, how do we drop the ball and pick it up and not get stuck in this place of guilt? And I love that, because it's such a renewing of our minds, like trying to figure it out. But there's grace to figure it out as well. And I feel like, you know what? God has called us to do incredible things, and he's not going to give us grace. He's not going to be able to give us a call and not the grace to fulfill it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would say, if someone was to ask me what was the main thing that helped me do it and how to figure this out, was I had to realize that it didn't matter what anybody else thought.
Yeah.
It really didn't matter if I grew up in a traditional home, my mom stayed home with us full time, or I grew up, I was in a space where women had to have a full career. All of that is semantics. What really mattered was my relationship with the Holy Spirit and asking him what he wanted me to do and doing that no matter what anybody else thought. And I remember my husband and I would say this together, which sounds kind of like mean, but I promise that we would look at each other and say, it's us against the world. And it was that concept of, as long as you and I are in this together, it doesn't really matter what everybody else thinks, because they won't stand before God for our kids, and they won't stand before God for their calling. And I think it's really important that, we lean into the purpose that God has on our lives and ask him for strategy. Instead of just trying to read a book or ask somebody to tell me what to do with my kids or how our parents raised us, we're looking for a divine strategy. Just like our call, we're looking for a divine strategy in our mothering. And let me just say this. I don't think mothering is a place where we feel the most successful. I think mothering is a place where we feel the most humbled.
Amen.
And I think we feel like, wow, I need to learn this, and I need to do this better, and I need to grow in this area. And it's a reflection. It allows us to stay humble and allows us to have some insight into how we think about life, how we talk about things, what we believe about ourselves. It really is. So instead of almost like eating that and internalizing it and allowing it to erode our confidence, it's actually, I think, a God-given gift to let us see where the areas that we need to grow. I mean, sometimes it's like, not to belabor the point, but I love my boys so much that when I see them, I want to eat their faces. Like, I'm just in love with them, and they might do something that's like being a punk about something, but when I see them, I want to embrace them, and I've held them, and I say, I love you. And how many times as a mom has the Holy Spirit whispered, that's how I see you, or that's how I treat you. We have this interactive, supernatural reality in our homes where the Spirit of God is showing us his heart for us, but also showing us where we're lacking the reality of who he is in our lives.
Yeah, it is so true. And I love that you said that. And I think some of the ways that I've seen you be really intentional about that and the priorities that you have is by setting boundaries. And I know sometimes that's a scary word, but we're going to take a short break really quickly, and then we're going to come back, because I really want to unpack that. And I sometimes feel a little bit guilty for setting boundaries, but I know that in order to really fulfill the call that is on my life and do a great job mothering, I have to say no in order to say yes. Right? Because every time you say no to something, you're saying yes, And so I want to talk more about that, but we're going to take a quick break and we're going to jump back in on that one. Hi, welcome back. We are here with Havilah, and we are talking about the juggle of motherhood and working, and we are getting right into it with boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries for a minute, because this really is our key to success, I think, as women trying to figure out, how do we do life? How do we passionately run after the call of God on our life? And let's maybe this is a rabbit trail, but not let the excuse of motherhood stop us from doing that.
Yeah.
But just doing both of that really well. Like,
Yeah.
can you talk to me? Because I feel like you have boundaries down pat. Like, I mean, you're writing a book on boundaries, right?
Yeah.
So teach me your ways.
I'll do my best. I will do my best. I did not understand boundaries or know anything about boundaries until I had a crisis in my life. And when I had our second son, Hudson, I was not myself. I just knew I wasn't myself. And I had two babies, 17 months apart, so it was a little wild. And eventually I was at a pediatric appointment and I was explaining to the pediatrician how I was really struggling. And she looked at me and said, "It sounds like you have postpartum depression." And when she said it, I knew she's right. Something is not right. So I started crying in the appointment. And I'm thinking, only in motherhood am I sitting here weeping in an appointment for my child. But she said, "You need to call somebody and get some help. And of course, I'll help you, whatever you need." So I remember calling one of my friends. Her mom was a Christian counselor. And I wanted to go meet her. And I went into her office and she asked me a few questions. And at the end of it, she said to me, well, out of the 14 signals of postpartum depression, you have 13 of them.
Oh my goodness.
And I, again, burst into tears. What am I gonna do? And so because I'm a leader and an efficient person, I'm like, what do you want me to do? And she was like, nothing. I don't want you to do anything. I want you to get a good night's sleep. And we're gonna work on getting a good night's sleep. And once you can get sleep, your brain gets rid of its toxins and you'll be able to receive the information I'm giving you. And so I ended up going to her for over 6 months and walking through healing until she finally sat down and she said something to me that made me want to punch her in the face. She said, Havilah, and this is 6 months later, she said, "Do you really want to know what I think about all of this?" And I said, "I do, I'm ready." I was feeling much better about my life. And she said, "You would have been here eventually. The baby just got you here sooner."
Wow.
And she said, "You don't know how to do life healthy and you don't know how to have boundaries." And she was right. I didn't know how to do boundaries. I was raised in a minister's home. I was in ministry at this point. And I thought yes was godly. You know, I thought no was mean. And so she said to me, "If you're willing to come hang out with me for 1 year, every Friday for 2.5 hours, I'm going to gather a group of other women that are completely anonymous. You're not going to be allowed to know their last name or where they serve, but they're highly influential women that need to learn these skills as well. And I'm going to teach you every single Friday, and you have to come every Friday and pay for it." And it was a huge sacrifice, but I sat, and that year ended up almost turning into 2 years, and I learned what it looked like to be a healthy mom and a wife. And what it came down to was boundaries. And boundaries are simply where I begin and where you end, or where I end and where you begin. We're owners of our own space, and that's our stewardship. And so when I'm clear on what I need to own, life gets so much easier. And when I am owning everybody else's space, life gets really complex. So as a mom, bring it back, I had to learn what God held me responsible for. And those were 3 distinct things: my feelings, how I feel about life; my attitudes, what I think about life; and my choices, what I do in my life. And those things were in my yard, and I get to steward those areas, and no one else is responsible. Like, we bought a home recently, and we live in, I didn't know it was like an elderly retired neighborhood, but apparently it is, because everybody mows their lawn every other day. But if I walked outside and was like, "Mike, why didn't you mow my lawn? You have the time." You'd think, that's weird. He's not gonna mow your lawn. This is your yard. It's the same way in our lives. We don't often steward our yards, and we expect a lot of people to take care of things. But when you get really clear on what is yours and what is not yours, life begins to be not just manageable, but super enjoyable. And that's taken me a long time. I mean, I'm saying that like I'm an expert, but through tears and anxiety and fear of man, and all of that, did I have to really learn how to steward my life.
I think the fear of man is like hitting on something, though, because I think the reason that we as women don't have boundaries is because we have this fear that people may not like us. We may come across mean, especially being Christian women. You know, like you said, saying yes is the nice thing to do. It
is.
Right? And so, but it's not always the godly thing to do. It's not always wisdom to do that. And so we kind of wrap our yeses into this Christian package.
We do.
When the Lord has never asked us to say yes to some of those things.
That's
and
exactly
so,
right.
you know, I always look at my kids and I'm like, if I'm saying yes to a coffee date or I'm saying yes to someone else, I'm saying no to them, you know? And so like, I love that you have those three areas in your life. And I just like love to encourage people, get with God and find out where are the areas that you're supposed to say yes to.
Yeah.
And that changes, right? Season to season, that changes for sure. But one of the things I am not great at, and you can speak to this because I feel like you're really good at this, is emails, text messages, and like
the
social media inboxes. Like, I feel like when I've seen a message, I'm like, ugh. Like, most of the time I'm like, yay, I love hearing from people. But sometimes I'm like, oh, now I have Facebook, Instagram, my email, my text messages, my voicemail. And I've got messages on all of these platforms. And the people coming in those roads are expecting responses. They're expecting answers. I just feel like there's, now I have to respond to everything.
Right. So I'm wondering where we learned that every response deserves another response. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in our culture, we learned that every phone call deserves a phone call and every text deserves a text. And what's happened now is that the world is now dictating where our time is going because of what they are, you know, wanting from us. Like I used to have this PA, and she was one of those that would ask me, can we get this done? And what about this? And have you made a decision about this? And I remember thinking, I'm not ready to make that decision yet. And I don't know about that yet. And what I realized was that she was wanting me to finish her to-do list. And I think we often don't realize that the world wants us to finish their to-do list. And yet if all we do is finish their to-do list, we will never be strategic in our own lives. So there's a couple practical ways to address this.
Give them
so
to
first
us.
and foremost is I want you to, instead of feeling bad about saying no or not responding, I want you to say to yourself, I have chosen to be more obedient to God. Because it comes down to obedience. That's it. I've chosen to be more obedient to God by stewarding my time. Period. And then secondly is you can set up boundaries that have more of a filter. Like I have a friend and she on her Instagram profile says, I do not check DM messages, but you're welcome to comment.
I love
so that way, anybody who gets on her Instagram knows she's not in her DMs. That's it. When I was young, when I had my littles, I would I had an automatic response in my email that said, because I value my time with my very young children, I may not be able to get back to you in a timely manner or at all. Thank you for your patience and grace and allowing me to be the mom that I desperately want to be.
Okay, I feel like maybe we need to add that into the notes, like as a template, so that all of the moms can like copy and paste.
Yeah, because I'm allowed to say, this is what's important to me right now. And what you want to do is say, I'm crystal clear because you're not confused. And also you want to say it in such a way that closes the conversation. And what you'll do is you'll start to set those boundaries up to where people can't quite get to you and have the access. And then if somebody does text you and you don't get back to them, we as women are so good at, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. Well, what if instead of saying, I'm so sorry, we said, thank you for your patience. Or thank you for understanding my busy life. Without ever saying you're sorry. Because you're not sorry. Good. You are stewarding the most precious thing that God can give you, and that's a human life. And so we are allowed. And I always think about this. If feelings are in my yard, my feelings, and your feelings are in your yard, if somebody says to you, you made me angry. No, actually, I didn't make you angry. I'm not powerful enough to go inside of you and choose anger. You did that. So instead of assuming that we are powerful enough to get other people to respond good or bad, what if we realize we have no power to get them to respond? Like if you and I, let's just, say I call you and you don't respond to me. And you immediately think, oh, Havilah thinks I'm lazy. Havilah thinks that I'm, she saw me on my socials and now she knows I have time and she probably thinks like I am ignoring her. Or what if you flip that script to Havilah? I bet Havilah knows I'm really busy. I bet she knows that I have a lot going on.
Yeah.
I bet she's choosing empathy.
Yes.
So instead of, I think we often let people think judgment versus empathy. So for me, I choose empathy. I go, you know what? They have an opportunity to see my life and give me grace and give me empathy. If they don't want to do that, that's on them.
Yeah.
And I'll just finish with this idea.
Yeah.
How you choose to respond says everything about you, and how I choose to respond says everything about me. If I choose to be angry that you didn't text me back, that says everything about me.
Yes.
And if I don't respond to you because I'm giving time to my kids and you're mad about it and I don't care, that's because it says everything about me.
Yeah.
I am choosing to value. I'd much rather, like I said, I have a congregation of 4. That's my congregation.
I love that.
Right?
Yes.
So I got to steward that. It takes time and practice, but we can do it.
Yes. So we're going to take a quick break right now, but I want to jump back into stewardship because I think it's a really big key, stewarding what God has given us. And that may be babies and little kids. It may be ministry. It may be work. And you may not even have kids at this point, or your kids are all grown and out of the house, but there's other things that the Lord is calling you to steward. And I want to talk a little bit about stewardship when we get back. So we'll be back right after this break. Hi, welcome back. We are with Havilah Cunnington, and we've been talking about boundaries and the juggle of motherhood, ministry, work. And right now, we are just going to talk really quickly about stewarding the call of God on your life. And I want to talk to Havilah about this because I think she has some great insights into it, but she's done it both when she's been a mom and before she was even married. And so talk us through a little bit about some of the lessons that you've learned and how to steward the call of God on your life.
Yeah, I was thinking about Ephesians 4:1 says, I urge you now to live a life worthy of the calling that you've received. And I think that when we get close to Jesus, the first thing we want to do is start living the life we know he created us to live.
Yeah.
And often that's purpose, right? The Bible says to go into all the world and preach the gospel. And that's not just a specific calling, that's a mandate on our lives. And so I think there's this thing that we deal with. I remember one time when I was just, beginning to really walk in the call of God in my life. I remember the Holy Spirit saying to me, Havilah, you need to take yourself seriously. And I said, well, what do you mean? I take myself seriously. He goes, no, I take you very seriously.
Wow.
And just understanding that I had to take the call of God in my life very seriously. But I was guilty of something that I like to say, idealism, right? I was guilty of thinking I need to have the perfect degree with the perfect spouse, with the perfect kids, with the perfect opportunity, and then I will shine and I'll become that woman I was called to become. And then I'm single at 22 and 24 and 25 and 26, and my timelines were going away. And I'm realizing I need to stop waiting for the stars to align for me to do the things God's called me to, but instead do the things that I know God's put in my life, and then he will add those things to me. And here's the truth. In 10 years, I went from living in my parents' home, not being married, not having any kids, never having written a book, not traveling. I was just serving my local church faithfully, day in and day out, the services. I was setting up chairs, answering phones, to going, and I wrote my 10th book this year. I have 4 kids. I'm in my own home. I've traveled the world internationally speaking. God has just done so much. But I'll tell you what, it was when I decided to step into my call in the mundane, and I realized that Jesus was going to meet me between the washer and the dryer like he did the woman at the well, I could relax. And I just think as moms, we're the worst. We're like, well, once my kids get this age, and once I have my husband does this, then I'll be able to fulfill the call of God. I'm not asking you to kick your kids to the curb. We're not asking you to say, get rid of the heavy weight. But what we are asking is that God's going to give you strategy to figure that part out. But if you're being idealistic about it, I promise you there will never be an ideal season. And I know you know that. You've planted a church. You've done some things in this season with some littles. Yeah. Have you ever felt that way?
Oh my goodness, all the time. I constantly am like, is this really my life? Because I do not feel qualified But you know what? I'm just going to step out and be faithful and obedient, even in the midst of my, like, maybe insecurity.
Absolutely.
Over my lack of experience or whatever it is. You know, I'm like, I've just committed to saying yes to God. And if that means doing it scared, that means doing it scared. And I live most of my life doing things scared.
Yeah.
Because I'm so not worried, but I'm so aware of the accountability that I'm going to be held to.
Yeah.
You know, I'm so aware that I have to stand before the Lord one day and give account. Like, and he's not going to say to me, oh, it's okay, you get a pass because you had small kids.
Right. Or you had a strong husband, he fulfilled the call, and you got to just hang out with him.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It's like, no. It's actually got nothing to do with your husband. It's got nothing to do with your pastors. It's got nothing to do with your kids. It's got everything to do with you and your call. And I love that. And so one of the things I want to just ask you really quickly before we wrap this up is the whole show, it's called A Life You Love. And one of the things I don't want people to hear is that your life has to be perfect in order to love it.
Yeah.
But tell us, like, what is a lesson that you've learned and how to live the life that you love in the midst of not knowing and in the midst of the crazy. And I mean, we're in such a crazy season, but we have to learn to live our lives and love our lives even in the crazy.
Yeah, I would say my number one secret is just drugs. No, I'm kidding. Drugs, no. I would say, to be honest, I remember when I used to travel and minister, and I used to, but with my kids and everybody would get in the car because we had to drive a lot of places rather than fly, all the things we do now. But I would get in the car, and I remember feeling ashamed, like, oh, I should have said this, and I didn't do this, and I should have done that. And I would just out loud say, okay, we're gonna ignore our losses and celebrate our success. And I would say it every time under my breath, I'm gonna ignore my losses and celebrate my success.
Yeah.
And it was this narrative of like, the losses are over. I can't fix any of that, but I can focus on my success. And I think there's something really profound when we get good at editing things and reframing them in ways that allow us to be at peace with it being in process.
Yes.
Right? So I would just say, anytime I'm feeling that it needs to be perfect, I realize that I'm putting standards on myself that God would never put on me.
Yeah.
He knows what it's like to be human.
Yeah.
And he knows that we can celebrate our success even while at times losing.
Yeah.
Maybe the ideal part of what we wish had happened.
Yeah, and just shifting our focus to concentrating on what is God doing, not what isn't he doing.
And don't take yourself so seriously.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't laugh at yourself, if you can't laugh with each other, I just think sometimes God goes, you guys are the most boring people. You're so serious. I'm a fun God. I created laughter. I created humor. I created babies. I created dogs. Like, think about this God who had a lot of energy and humor that was around us.
I love it. I love it. I have loved sitting here with Havilah. You have so many great, amazing tools for us. But just really quickly, tell us the name of the book that you're writing, because you're writing a book on boundaries. Yes. Which we all need in our lives.
I'm so excited.
Right?
Yes. It's
What's
called
the name of it?
I Do Boundaries.
Okay.
I Do Boundaries, and it's about finding your power, learning how to protect what matters, and stop feeling bad about it. So that's on Amazon. Anywhere you are, you can find it. And it's all about knowing how to protect what matters and not feeling bad about it.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope that this has blessed you. I hope that you've gotten some tools that you can take away. And I would love to see you next time on A Life You Love.